All right. Good morning, everybody. Event Trader coming on here. It is 11 a.m. in the morning, Monday morning, which of course means we are going to do our discussion on geopolitics and policy with our policy expert, Carmine Mateos. So, Carmine, how are you doing? How was your weekend?
Oh, pretty good, Gavin. How about yourself?
It was pretty good. It was up at my niece's graduation from the University of Scranton, which is my alma mater too. So,
Nice.
little walk down memory lane for me over here.
Nice.
How about you?
I went to the Toyota dealership and bought a new car, and it was a pretty good experience. They actually said that I have to wait about 2 to 3 weeks because it's still in the plant in Alabama. So
Oh
uh,
yeah,
yeah, so it's going to be 0 miles when I get that thing. They said
nice,
they,
nice.
they told me nobody can even test drive it. I said, all right, that's good.
Get that new car smell, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. How are the terms? Okay.
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, the trade-in, they always try to give me their first offer for that trade-in was I just kind of I almost laughed at them. So we went back and forth a few times to kind of get what I wanted on that. So
Yeah. Yeah, they could be rascals, those car sales people and stuff. Were you asking them at all about the tariffs and the impact out of curiosity?
yeah, I asked them and they said, well, on this particular vehicle you're buying, it's made in Huntsville, Alabama, so there's no impact. But they said, a lot of their other cars, like their Rav4, it's made in Canada and in Japan, and those prices are probably going to be going up in a few months. They told me so. If you want to, if you they told me if you know anybody that's interested, now is a good time to get in.
Of course. What else are they going to tell you there?
Right, exactly.
So okay, good anecdotal information
Yeah,
for
I
us
mean, I mean, I
there,
don't, I don't know if
Carmen.
they were giving me a line, but that's what they told me. So
Yeah, yeah. So I don't trust anything out of those car salesmen's
yeah,
mouths myself. So, but okay, no, that's good to know. So, let me know how the delivery goes, and if there's any thing that disrupts your deal there going forward, Carmine.
yeah. They
So,
they, they, t- they told me so I said the price is guaranteed, right? It's not going to go up. He said no, it's not going to go up when you come back in 3 weeks. It's going to be whatever we talked about here, whatever we signed off on. I said all right, all right.
all right, we'll
So
we'll we'll talk in 3 weeks. I guarantee there's going to be a couple of charges on that. Is my call.
yeah, yeah. I don't doubt it.
So, all right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the markets here then, Carmine, and what's kind of going on there. So, let's kind of kick off with that Moody's downgrade. Obviously, that's going to have a pretty big impact on the reconciliation process, in my opinion. Well, not necessarily a direct impact, but probably makes some people a little bit more cognizant of some of the issues facing the United States on the fiscal side of things. Certainly is going to put it front and center
Yep.
for what we're watching here. So, what was your take on that downgrade, and what's been some of the things you've been seeing over the weekend with comments from the Trump administration? I know Bessent was out talking about it, and other things that might have caught your attention.
Yeah, so Besson basically said it was a lagging indicator. It's basically administration would any administration I think would say something like that. But I think the more important thing is like what you mentioned as far as how it impacts the reconciliation talks, and I think it kind of gave the fiscal hawks a little bit of a wind at their back, right? Because this came out Friday night, and then Saturday they said, okay, we're going to push for more. Medicaid cuts, right? And not necessarily more cuts itself, but speeding up for when the cuts take place. So, for example, in the original bill, the Medicaid cuts started in 2029, which was after Trump left office. Uh, they say that it had nothing to do with that. It's just how they can implement it, which is I don't really believe, but that's what they said. But so the fiscal hawks are pushing for those to start either in 2026 or 2027. So they got them started in January 2027. They got an agreement from Johnson to do that. So it did. This will lower the cost of the bill a little bit. I mean, it won't be dramatic or anything like that, but it will lower it a little bit. And we'll have to wait for the updated CBO score, which will probably come out this week. that I think that'll be a big headline to look forward to, because I think if anything over like 4 trillion will probably might be disruptive to the bond market. But if you see something in some of these other estimates from the Washington Post had it between 2.5 and 3.3, yeah, I mean that's a lot of money over 10 years. But it's better than 5 or 6. So I think that CBO score is going to be very important, exactly where that irons out. Because there's another thing that they're looking at too, which is the salt cap. Right, the salt cap, the original bill was $30,000, and they're looking to move that up to about 40 or 50 because the New York lawmakers are demanding that. Right, so that's going to add to the cost of the bill, while the Medicaid speeding up the implementation of the Medicaid cuts are going to decrease the cost of the bill. So it's kind of a balance that they have to do. So we'll see where the CBO score lets out on that. But some of the other things that are in the bill, of course, it extends its 2017 tax cuts for all income levels, including the top rate. There was one gentleman from New York, representative from New York, that proposed raising the top rate to pay for salt. I kind of laughed when I read that, because the predictable reaction from the low state representatives was, I saw coming a mile away, was they're basically saying that we're not going to raise taxes on our rich people in our states to subsidize people in New York. So
Yeah,
that
because
really,
I mean, the whole
yeah.
thing about salt is basically taxing richer folks, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So basically, if you're a representative from Texas, right, your constituents, I mean, to be honest, probably don't particularly like people from that area of the country to begin with, and now you're asking them to now you're asking them to pay higher taxes to subsidize, higher tax states. That's not going to go over well with those particular constituents. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that. I'm just saying that that's what the viewpoint of those people
Sure.
in those particular states. So, uh,
I mean, it's a pretty obvious arguing point, right? So
right, exactly. So I laughed when I saw that Saturday morning when I was at the dealership, and I was like, I kind of laughed when I read that. I was like, I knew the reaction would be 100 miles away. It was just so predictable. But
yeah,
but raising the top rate, I think is going to be something that doesn't go away. I think tying it to salt is a non-starter for the reasons I just described. But I think that might come up again during the Senate negotiations, because President Trump, privately, according to news reports, has been pushing them to do that to kind of lower the cost of the actual bill, not because of the salt deduction, but I think if they were able, right now I don't think that's going to happen, because I think the Republicans are solely firmly against it. Because I think what happened was Trump was talking to Johnson and Dune about this, and Johnson and Dune basically told him the reason why Bush 41 lost was because he raised taxes, and
right.
that kind of convinced them to hold down. But I don't think you're going to hear the end of it. I think you're going to hear this come up again, but not tied to salt. I mean, that's a non-starter. So, but we'll see if that comes up again during the Senate negotiations. The other parts of the bill, Medicaid cuts, which we addressed already, green energy cuts. The fiscal hawks wanted more green energy cuts, which they got um, in the House version of the bill. The Senate, there's a lot of senators that are kind of a little squirmish on that, because a lot of their states benefited from a lot of the green energy spending. So that's something that might go away in the Senate, not go away completely, but get lowered in the Senate version of the bill. So we'll have to keep an eye out on that. I think pretty much everybody agrees on is deregulation, energy reform, and immigration reform, and a debt ceiling increase to 4 trillion. I don't see those aspects of the bill changing at all. But again, some of these other things, like making no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, I don't see those changing at all either. But some of these other things, like the salt cap, especially the Medicaid and the green energy stuff, could see changes in the Senate version once the House passes it. So here's the calendar about what's going to happen here. So on Wednesday at 1 a.m., believe it or not, uh, they are going to vote in the House Rules Committee on this legislation. The Rules Committee doesn't really have any of the fiscal hawks that were holding things up last week, so I expect the Rules Committee to approve this fairly easily. And then it'll go to the full House votes, which is expected on Thursday afternoon. Now, that could slip to Friday. I wouldn't raise a red flag if it does. I just, sometimes the scheduling doesn't work out very well. But my base case right now is that this gets passed by the end of the week. and then it goes to the
Now,
Senate.
what iteration the House bill gets passed?
Well, I'm sorry. What do you mean by
The,
iteration?
what what iteration of it? So this is the final bill.
Well, so yeah, so,
This is because I know right now we're in the process where all the different sectors of in the House, like the Energy Committee and everybody, are all writing up their separate bills, right? And then they combine it into one big bill.
that's what the budget committee did last night. So the budget
Okay.
committee, yeah. So that's
So
already,
so again, this is the final iteration. This
yeah.
is
They
the
can still
House
offer
bill that's going
amendments. So
to the
yeah,
Senate.
yeah. So
Okay.
they go. So they can still offer amendments, which I think will happen in some of the like the salt cap. There probably will be an amendment on that, like raising it from 30 to 40 or something, or something along those lines. They'll have to do an amendment before the actual vote, which they can do. But that as far as like some of these other minor things, like changing that and maybe changing a few of the Medicaid stuff, it's going to be the bill that I just subscribed is going to be what that passes out of the House. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll be watching that. So you're expecting the votes on that. Do you think that they have the votes right now to get it through?
Right now, they probably don't. There's about four fiscal hawks that are still kind of pushing for more Medicaid cuts. They said they're making progress. I think they'll get there. The SALT people are still wanting that to go to 40. My guess right now is that Johnson will make a deal, say, hey, we're gonna give a little bit more on the Medicaid side, 20 speed it up to 2026, 2027, like they already agreed to, and then give a $40,000 cap for the SALT, and I think that'll get enough people to get it over the finish line. Just bare bones. It's probably going to pass by one or two votes at the very most, because there'll be
Is
a
the
couple that
Senate
vote
going to
against it.
pick this bill apart?
Well, I'm sorry, what? Yes,
Will,
Senate. Yeah, the Senate's going to make changes. Uh, um, I think that there's going to be the green energy spending has been a red flag for like some of the senators, right? Because a lot of them, benefited in their particular states from that. So they're not gonna they're not gonna repeal it all completely, but they're going to maybe lower the amount of cuts that the House proposed, right? So it'll be if the Senate does that, it might be positive for like the solar stocks and the wind stocks if they kind of lower the amount of cuts that the House proposed. But right now, the House is basically cutting everything from the IRA. I mean, basically gutting it as far as green energy stuff. And I think that the Senate's going to say, okay, yeah, we agree that a lot of that was wasteful spending, but we're going to um, uh, lower the amount of. We're going to keep some of it, but we're going to still going to cut a significant amount. So that might be positive for like I said, First Solar and stocks like that. Once that happens, and the Senate, I think, will also um, look at some of the Medicaid cuts. They might try to water those down too. But again, this is the balance that they have to do because they can't water it down too much, otherwise they lose the fiscal hawks of the House, right? So they're going to have to keep being complete communication with them of what they want to do. My guess right now is that the House passes this version that I subscribed, like I said, at the end of the week. It goes to the Senate. They come back from Memorial Day recess on June 6th, and then they start negotiating. I think it'll take a few weeks for them to get everything in line. Then the Senate passes it at the end of June, and then it'll go back to the House, and sometime in July, that the House will pass the bill. I think this passes before it gets to President Trump's desk before the August recess. Has always been my expectation since January, basically, and I continue to reaffirm that.
Okay. All right. Let's see. So just going through, who are the big actors to be watching here, Carmine? Just to
Yeah,
name
so
obviously
watch.
Johnson and
Yeah, obviously Johnson, Scalise in leadership, right? Also, Chip Roy, he's represented from Texas. He represents kind of the um, in between Austin and San Antonio area there. He's been very spoken out about cuts. He would love, even more cuts than what is being demanded right now. But he understands that it's gonna. Uh, Repeal some of the moderates if you do that too far. So if he gets on board, then I'm pretty sure this is going to put 100% chance this is going to pass. Uh, but there's also some others. As far as on the SALT side, you have Mike Lauer from New York. He represents the Westchester area. He has a lot of wealthy constituents that are concerned about salt. Um, So if he gets on board with the salt cap, that's a good sign for the bill as well. So like that's an example of on each spectrum, right? You have the more moderate member Mike Lahr, and you have the more conservative fiscal hawk Chip Roy. And if those two guys can get on the same page, it's a very good sign for the bill.
All right. So, do you think this Moody's downgrade and the fiscal hawks will be able to make any push by the end of the by the time we see a final bill here, Carmine? I mean,
Yeah, I
it's
do.
both sides are kind of torn, right? Because they both know that they need austerity, but neither one wants to do it while they're in charge because that obviously is a bit of a death sentence, like you said, pulling Bush 41 out, right?
Yeah,
So how do you see this end game coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the fiscal hawks are going to try to push since this downgrade. I mean, they're going to say, hey, we just got downgraded. We got to push for more, and I think they're going to get. They're not going to get everything they want, not even close to that, but they're going to get some. They're going to get that Medicaid cuts reduced to 2026. I think that's going to happen, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out politically because there's a lot of parts of this bill that are going to be very popular. The immigration stuff's going to be very popular. The energy stuff's going to be very popular. Uh, but the Medicaid stuff is not going to be very popular, right? And the tax cuts for like tax on tips and tax on Social Security, that's going to be very popular. But the Medicaid cuts are not. So that's going to be kind of the issue that the moderates are going to have to deal with because they're going to be the ones in the swing seats, right? They're the ones that are going to have their head on the chopping block, so to speak, in the midterms. It's not going to be Chip Roy because he's in a very safe district. So that's the kind of the balance that they have to work out there.
All right. Well, we'll be continuing to watch this play out, Carmine. Do you see this getting done before August?
Yeah, I see. My expectation is that it gets to President Trump's desk before the August recess, which starts on early August. So
All right. There you have it. Carmine is putting his reputation out on the line that this gets done. We'll be watching it closely, Carmine. So appreciate the updates there. See, just continuing on the congressional front here. California EV mandate. What's going on with that front?
Yeah, so the House passed a bill to basically revoke California's EV mandate by 2035. Of course, California has a mandate that all the gas powered cars will basically be new sales of gas powered cars will be banned by 2035. Uh, the House voted in a bipartisan manner to revoke that. About 25 or so Democrats joined all the Republicans to vote for this. I expect this to pass the Senate and get to President Trump's desk where he will sign it. I think the Congress is doing Gavin Newsom a huge favor here because he's going to want to run for president, obviously, and if this was still in place, he could say, well, what, I tried. He could have it both ways. He could tell the folks that are worried about climate change that, hey, I tried, but the Congress revoked me, and it won't go into effect in 2035, which I think would be over the country is going to be very unpopular, especially in the swing states that are going to decide the 2028 election. So I think it's going to be. I think they're doing Gavin Newsom a huge favor here. He'll never admit that, but that's what I think. I do think it'll pass. It'll be negative for not necessarily for Tesla because they kind of already sold enough cars to not qualify for it, but some of the other ones like Rivian and Lucent, that'll be negative for those folks.
All right. Anything else on the congressional front that we need to address,
That's pretty
Carmen?
much it.
Okay, so moving along, let's talk about the administration, what's going on. We'll talk a little bit about President Trump's trip last week in the Middle East and where some of the tariff negotiations go now. I know that there was a lot of buzz with Japan over the weekend, so Bessent was also on some of the talk shows. So, what's the latest on what Bessent's saying here and some of the different negotiations going on?
Yeah, so Bessa basically said it was a little bit more hawkish than over the last few weeks when I watched him on Meet the Press yesterday. I was kind of I wouldn't say taken aback, but it was just kind of piqued my interest a little bit that he was a little bit more hawkish than he usually is as far as the tariffs are concerned. He basically said that if the countries don't want to negotiate in good faith, we're going to put the tariffs back to the April 2nd levels, and yeah, he kind of has to say that for negotiation purposes. But it was just more interesting coming from him. You usually hear that from the Navarros and the Lutniks in the administration and so forth. But so as far as the other negotiations are going, the Japan and South Korea, they have elections going forward, so they've been pushing back on some things. I think after they have their elections, I think they'll be more willing to negotiate, and I think those deals will probably get done before the end of the year. But it won't be anything quick because they have to wait for their elections. As far as India is concerned, I think India is probably going to be the next one that they announce. They seem to be pretty close. I think they probably would have been announced earlier, except that India kind of got into a little a war there with Pakistan, so they probably weren't the officials in India probably weren't thinking about trade deals. They were probably thinking about what's going on with Pakistan, so that they kind of put that on the back burner. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I think the deals are going to be moving along. I think you'll see more of those as weeks go by. But there's always going to be these threats, right? There's always going to be, hey, if you guys don't, do what we say, we're going to put those tariffs back to where we had them. They have to say that, right? Because otherwise, in their view, that's how they get their negotiating leverage. So I expect more comments like that. But it was just more interesting coming from Besson because I think he's usually the kind of the more voice of reason. And I'm not saying he wasn't in that interview, but he's just a little bit more hawkish than he was before.
All right. What's a lot of news announced with the Middle Eastern states there, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. So, what are some of the things that broke from President Trump's visit last week?
Yeah, so President Trump announced that Saudi Arabia committed 600 billion into invest in the United States. The UAE will make investments focused on AI. UAE also bought a lot of Boeing planes. I think billions of dollars worth. I forget the exact number, but we have it on our site if you're interested in knowing the details. This was obviously positive for the AI stocks like Nvidia and ARM and Intel and AMD. Also positive for Boeing and GE Aerospace, which got some orders as well. I think it was a pretty successful trip for the president. I think that last week was kind of one of his better weeks politically speaking. He kind of started off with the China tariffs getting lowered, and then he kind of made some successes here in Saudi Arabia. So I think he kind of has a little bit of a win in his back going forward here. But I wouldn't be surprised over the next few weeks that if his approval already kind of ticks up a little bit. But I don't think it's going to go any higher than 52. I don't think it's going any lower than 41. It's the country's just too polarized in one way or direction for that to happen. So he's kind of going to stay in his range, so to speak, to where that's going to happen. But yeah, but as far as that trip, like I said, I think the winners are going to be GE Aerospace, Nvidia, Boeing. Were the winners off of his trip. One of the interesting things was, of course, was his speech in Saudi Arabia, where he kind of really explicitly went after nation building and so forth. It was just really interesting hearing that speech from a Republican. You had like Mike Pence come out was on Meet the Press yesterday. He was very critical of his comments. He was critical of many other things too, but we're talking about this right now. So he was pretty critical about the nation building and all that. Uh, you know, so it was interesting, again hearing that from a Republican because that's a speech that a Democrat would have gave in like 2001 or 2002, 2003 when they were running against the Iraq War, right? So it was very similar to that, and it's not particularly surprising because that's what he ran on. He kind of ran on getting out of foreign conflicts, but again, that speech was kind of really interesting coming from a Republican.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree there. So, um, worth following on that front. Anything else from that region, Carmine, that was capturing your attention?
That's pretty much it.
Let me ask, because I know you don't have it on here, but Iran was obviously
Oh yeah, yeah.
bandied about a lot,
I
and
should do that. Yeah.
the nuclear talks. What's your thought on that process, how it's unwinding, and is there anything catching your interest on that front that you think
Yeah,
could
good
be
question.
imminent?
So Iran basically, there was a Iranian official that gave an interview to NBC last week, and he basically said, "Hey, we're ready to kind of accept a deal with some kind of conditions." He didn't go into exactly what the conditions were, but he said, "We know we're willing to accept a nuclear deal." And then Trump came out and said, "Well, yeah, we're pretty close, but if you guys don't agree to the deal, we're gonna." He basically said, "We're gonna launch attacks against you against your nuclear facilities." That didn't really go over too well with Iran. They accused of making threats and everything, so and accused the administration of lying. So I think right now I would guess that for Iran that yeah, there's going to be a deal. With I want to put a timeline on it, but there would be a deal. I think. Oh, right now I'm more towards getting the deal than I am predicting that there would be airstrikes. If there is airstrikes, I think it's more likely to come from. I think Netanyahu is basically itching at the trigger to attack Iran. I think he wants to. He's desperate to do that, right? I think if there is airstrikes, it will come from the Israeli side. Basically, Trump will kind of give Netanyahu the green light to do that. But right now, I think I'm leaning more towards the fact that there's going to be a deal. But there's going to be a lot of rhetoric back and forth. I mean, these are the U.S. and Iran are not exactly buddies, so they're going to have a lot of uh, 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 negative rhetoric back and forth at each other, and I expect that to continue.
Okay, well, we'll watch that play out. Hopefully, we could find some sort of amicable uh,
Solution for that.
solution going on here. So we'll continue to track that. So, what's going on the Russia front here, then, Carmine?
Yeah, so Trump gave a Truth Social post on Saturday. He said that he's going to speak with Russian President Putin today at 10 o'clock. So I assume that call is going on as we speak. And then
Now,
after
I
he
did see something about a headline about Russia selling China more oil, so I'm going to assume that it's not
yeah.
going well, or he's just looking to tweak Trump beforehand.
Yeah, it definitely could be either one of those. But so he's going to talk to Putin first, and then he's going to talk to Zelensky. Again, I don't expect any type of breakthrough from this call. I think at best, that they agree that we're going to work towards a ceasefire, but I wouldn't expect anything earth shattering to come out of this. I think Putin basically is kind of Trump mentioned this himself. He said, "I think Putin's tapping me along." I agree with him. I think he is tapping him along. I think he's going to continue to tap him along. So because I think basically Putin wants all of Ukraine. He probably wants more than that, but and I think he's going to be very reluctant to agree to any type of peace deal. So we'll see.
All right, yeah, it should be interesting. Definitely doesn't seem like Putin's in a rush to stop anything here,
Nope, not at
and
all.
certainly doesn't seem like Trump's persuading him to do anything. Which
Nope.
again, just a lot of people asking questions here of the United States' ability to get things done. I think. All right, Carmine. Anything else that we didn't address on the geopolitical side?
Nope, that's pretty much it. Oh, next
Oh,
show I wanted to say. So
yeah,
next week is Memorial Day, so we won't have a show then. But next week, the following week too, I'm on vacation. I'll be in Las Vegas. So,
World Series of
but
Poker.
well, so I'm gonna be playing cash games. The World Series won't be till July.
You
So,
don't
but
like
I'm
the
gonna be
World
playing.
Series of Poker, right? You prefer the um, cash games, don't you?
Yeah, I do because I'm not really. Tournaments are really really hard. All the money, all the money in your equation for as far as profits are at the top, right? So you really have to win one of them to kind of get make up all the money you lost trying to play tournaments, right? So that's why I prefer cash games. But I'm gonna be out there playing poker for a week. I might come on with a quick update next week if on the bill if it passes the House and kind of reiterate what I said today about the Senate's going to make some changes. So you'll probably hear from me sometime next week after the bill passes if it does.
Yeah. Hey, Carmine, just real quick, some questions came in. One from Diana here. Do you expect an adjustment to the AMT to offset the increase in the SALT deduction?
Not right now. I don't. I think that it would be probably negative for the moderates, but we'll have to keep in mind that's another one of those. Uh, that's another one of those chess pieces, so to speak, that Johnson's trying to get in there. But right now, I would say no, but it's
Okay.
possible.
Then the other, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Joe Biden, the news over the weekend, unfortunately, with his cancer diagnosis. Just wondering if that could have any impact on the Democratic Party, how things are running, or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, of course, obviously, we wish him the best. I mean,
Yeah.
prostate cancer is a horrible, horrible disease, and I definitely wish him the best. There's a lot of talk this last week, especially about the credibility of the Democratic Party because they came out and said that basically that he was all sharp as a tack and everything, and now these books are coming out saying that he did have a lot of slipping as far as his mental capacity. I think a lot of that talk might get watered down a little bit this week, at least in the near term, because of his prostate cancer diagnosis. I think the Democrats, would, but I don't think that those questions are going away. And I think that after after a few weeks, after today's news, I think you're going to start to hear a lot about that again. There's going to be you know, congressional investigations, congressional hearings. I wouldn't be surprised if, like, President Biden's old White House physician gets called to testify before Congress. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that happens. So, but again, we definitely wish him the best. But it's that's going to be one of the issues that the Democratic Party is going to have to deal with as far as credibility is concerned. As far as President Biden's health and so forth.
All right, Carmine, I think that will do it for us here then. So appreciate uh, your thoughts on that. So at this point, then, Carmine, we will let you get going. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll miss you for the next 2 weeks, but looking forward to talking to you on June 9th.
That sounds good. Thanks, Gavin. Have a good one.
Okay, you too. Take care.